At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Stephanie. She will go over the current and new HCBS approach and key improvements. Oh, and let me just say, at this point, you know, please write down questions that you might have. We do have a lot of slides to go through, and it would be beneficial to us if we can get through as many as possible before questions start coming in. Don't want you to forget them, so please write them down, and then we'll ask for questions here, and we'll be obviously open it to the remote areas as well for any questions and try to address those.
Thank you, Krista. Can you all hear me okay? I tend to talk a little more softly than the others. First, let me say good morning and welcome. I know Chris has already given a welcome, but I have to tell you, I've been with the division for 19 years, and what I'm going to go over and share with you today are probably some of the best changes that I've seen to HCBS since I've been working with these programs. To start with, I want to give you an overview of our current system. Most of you are already familiar with this. You know, our journey through the HCBS system begins with the assessment of need, and as Krista touched on a little bit about our RPATH assessment that we implemented in 2013, we did start with a little bit of a rough start. As with any new software product, there are some bugs and things that you have to work out, and our staff had a learning curve. But we've worked on our training, we worked on our algorithms, and to date, I fully believe in the assessment that we have. It's a solid tool. We've got good outcomes from that, and I hope that you agree with me. Anyway, we're using the assessment now to determine medical eligibility and the need, as well as the care planning and selecting the providers at the time that the nurses are in the home. And through this journey, once that part is completed and the plan of care sent to the providers, services are rendered, and then the provider bills and receives payment. Our approach for our new model, you're going to see that we'll review our current processes, introduce the changes and the rationale, discuss the benefits for the clients and the providers, and provide some examples for you so that you'll understand the new model. We'll talk about the assessment. But before we get started, I know this screen right here looks very busy. There's a lot of numbers and a lot to take in, but I want you to focus on just the dark blue areas for the adult companion services and the homemaker. Just to give you some background on what we're going to talk about today, these hands-on type services are the ones that primarily are the bulk of the billing that we see for the services under Elder Choices. And a new term to some of you might be attendant care or an attendant care bundle. And in our work and our efforts to try to make things easier for our providers and for our clients when it comes to choosing services, we looked at these hands-on type services, adult companion, homemaker, attendant care, and personal care, and thought that those were the most related services to include in one bundle. Now, the other services will remain as they are if you're wondering about those. And this slide goes into a little more detail about consolidating the similar services under the attendant care services. If you're Elder Choices and you meet that waiver level of care, that will include personal care, homemaker, adult companion care, and then for AAPD, attendant care. If you are strictly a personal care client and you do not meet level of care, personal care will remain as personal care is today. This doesn't impact that program. In the new model, these services will be bundled as one service. And then outside of that bundle, we're referring to those services as non-attendant care services that will include respite, adult day care, adult day health care, adult family home, and home delivered meals. It's important to note that we're continuing to work on strengthening our care coordination, implementing quality metrics, and potentially instituting a presumptive eligibility, as Krista just talked to you. This is the process you're all familiar with, our current assessment, where the RN goes into the home, completes the assessment, asking questions. Okay. asking questions to the client from the RPath assessment. And based on those responses, the RN picks the most appropriate answers. And then if that person is eligible for the program, then the care planning piece begins while they're in the home. They talk about the various services and assign the hours. And again, that care plan is sent out to the providers to determine the staffing and the scheduling. Some of the issues with that process that we have now is, while we're calling it a person-centered approach, sometimes there's a variance in the plans of care from the northern part of the state to the southern part of the state. And our goal is to have a consistent look. So if you have two people that look the same on assessments, that they'll be receiving the same services no matter where they live in the state. And also the providers have told us time and time again that they want some flexibility in implementing that plan of care. And this new model will give you that. Some of the core elements of the assessment, that this may be new to some of you. You're going to hear us talk about resource utilization groups, or RUGs. And these are going to help the RNs to determine the number of hours that a person should have on their plan of care. Research has showed us that RUGs are the best method to identify the needs of our clients. And also with the attendant care bundle, you'll have that same, can you still hear me? It's cutting out. Okay. And I've got this head cold or something, so I'm having a hard time hearing myself as well, and I apologize for that. So the attendant care bundle has been developed to combine similar hands-on forms of care like the personal care, attendant care, homemaker, and adult companion. Is everybody familiar with what a RUG is? Have you all heard of RUG groups or RUG levels, or are you awake out there? Okay. All right. These will help the RN determine an allocation of care. That may be a new set of terms for you instead of just the care planning. And this will be in a consistent, accurate manner of hands-on care. These RUGs group clients with similar situations and levels of acuity together, and it's based on research across North America. There are 23 of these RUG groups, but I think what I want you to take away from this more than anything, it's not something that you as a provider have to remember, and it's not anything that the nurses have to remember. This will be done behind the scenes with the assessment, and it'll be an automatic output when the RN completes the assessment. And each one of those RUG groups will have a unique number or allocation of hours associated with it. And the RN will be able to adjust those hours based on a defined set of extenuating circumstances. In the current system, yeah, I'm a little bit thrown off by that. Anyway, we won't do that for the non-attendant care services. And here's a slide that just shows you the description of the current versus the new assessment need. The RNs will conduct the assessment with the RPath, and in the new system, there won't be a change. They'll continue that process. Today, the RNs determine a range of hours to address the client's needs. In the future, the assessment will generate a RUG that's determining the allocation of hours, and then the nurse will be able to adjust that based on those circumstances. Today's system, the RN determines whether the non-attendant care services such as daycare, home-delivered meals may be needed, and that will be the same in the future, although we are looking at those services and considering what we need to do to improve those. Today's system, the providers determine the staffing and schedule appointments based on the plan of care. And in the new system, you'll still do that, but you'll be able to roll over any unused hours from month to month up to 20% of those allocated hours. This allows you that flexibility that many of you have asked for, like if an individual's been in the hospital and they need some additional hours when they come home, you'll be able to use some of those hours when a person needs more care. The flexibility that the DAS RNs will be the option to adjust the allocation of care based on RUG. And again, those circumstances will be defined. It's not something that they can just use subjectively. It'll be predefined, and it will be a part of the care planning or person-centered planning process. Some of the proposed extenuating circumstances for upward adjustments include grandfathering necessary to the guaranteed safety. The cap to that will be up to the previous level of care. The second circumstance will be if there's a high perceived medical risk, such as if the person has been falling or has some illness which requires them to need more care. There is an option for informal supports to increase up to 10% if the informal supports are lower than the average for the RUG, or if they live in a remote location and some more time is needed to run errands, or if they have to take the laundry out and do that type of thing. The proposed extenuating circumstances for a downward adjustment on the hours that like if the client does not want the services, they refuse or they opt out, or the informal supports are higher than average for that RUG level, there could be a 10% decrease. Or the client receives outside benefits, we want to avoid duplication of services, or if you have multiple clients in the home. I think this is probably one of the biggest changes that we've made, where we've launched the new website for reconsiderations. There was a provider information memo sent out in August. Did you all receive that? It was for the reconsiderations and reassessments. Does this sound familiar to any of you? I'm getting ahead. No. Okay. I was going to go into detail, so this may be new to some of you. Some of the discussions that we had, or the tenets that Krista talked about, were the assessment and the reassessment process. Let me just see this. I'll talk about reassessments first then, before the reconsiderations. One of the things that we were asked over and over and over was whether or not a provider could attend the reassessments or the assessments for the clients. And as a part of the person-centered planning, we just can't dictate who's going to be present for the assessment. It's the client's choice as to who is present for that assessment. And sometimes we would hear that there's information that's in conflict with what the client is telling us. So we worked on a method to gather that information, since the RPATH assessment considers all sources of information to make a determination. So for reassessments, you all know that you have an expiration date on your plan of care, and you should be tracking that. The registered nurses who work for DAS begin the reassessment process 6 to 10 weeks prior, 6 to 10 weeks prior to that expiration date. In order for the providers to be able to contribute information, we have set up a portal through the DAS website. Is it the DAS website? For you to be able to submit that information up to 12 weeks prior to the plan of care expiration date. And if you're not familiar with this, we'll send it out to you so you all will have it. But you'll need some login credentials. And we can get that for you. I don't have that information with me.
Let me just say that will be posted on our main webpage site, and that address is www.daas.ar.gov, and you'll see a link that goes in with that. But each agency will have to get a password, I believe it is, but it will not be person-specific. It will be agency-specific. And it has some general instructions that you will see when you get there.
And I believe that's one username per agency rather than all of your employees at your agency. And then we'll have an internal process for retrieving the information that you submit for the reassessment process, and ensure that the DASRN has that information and can review it prior to reassessing that client.
I just want to say one other thing too is we've had this, and I want to say for all the representatives who's been working with us, this is live today. So if you want to start with this, with submitting the information, we are able to accept that now.
And in the same manner, we have the reconsideration process. That information was included in the same PIM that was mailed out August the 8th, which we'll need to send this out again, Connie. I'm getting head nods that they didn't get it. There are an explanation and steps to requesting a reconsideration if a person is denied on a reassessment, and that will be printed on the back of the 9511. So when you all request your next batch of forms, you'll have that. And it's a way of communicating to you to let you know ahead of time whether or not someone was not approved for the program and you really feel like they should be. There are some steps you can go through as a provider to request a reconsideration.
And I'm sorry. Can I say one more thing?
Help yourself.
The reconsideration process does not in any way change anything with the appeal process. You may go ahead because the appeal process requires action within a certain number of days. So I believe by all means encourage folks if they feel they need to appeal it, you can withdraw an appeal. Okay, that might sit there for a while. The reconsideration process is a second avenue and should run potentially smoother, or not smoother, but maybe quicker than the actual appeal process, is my understanding. So you can't do one or the other.
The other. You have the option to do both. So have I thoroughly confused you? Is everybody with me? Okay. And we'll make sure this provider information memo is resent where you'll have all of the instructions. But the main takeaway from that is that you know that it is live now and you have that option. And you need to go ahead and request your login credentials on the DAS website. Okay, as we look to the R path, it's more than just determining eligibility now. We'll be using it for our service determination and allocation of care. And then we just talked about the reconsiderations and how to submit information in advance of the reassessment. I'm sorry, I didn't prepare this presentation, so it's difficult sometimes when you're delivering information you just received. Some of the benefits for the new assessment process for our clients and providers include a clearly allocated amount of care where there's not going to be a range anymore. You'll have a set amount of hours per month, and providers will be able to work with the client in a person-centered manner and deliver those hours that fits them best. There's greater transparency in decisions around the allocation of care. And for you all, there will be a more straightforward billing process with the attendant care bundle. And some of the applicable payment improvement tenets include rewards for providers for higher quality, efficient care. This is just an example of a historical usage of care versus what it would look like in the future. And this may have come, John, did this come from an actual example that we worked with our smaller group? Okay. So this was from a real person in the program, and you can see on the current side the homemaker hours that were ordered and the personal care hours that were ordered totaled between 52 and 69, and actually only utilized 34.1 of those hours. In the future model, this person in this RUG group, which is PBO, reduced physical functions, would be eligible to receive 70.3 hours per month of attendant care. Now that number of hours could be adjusted upward or downward based on those predefined extenuating circumstances that I shared with you earlier. Here's a second example of an individual that is clinically complex. This plan of care currently has adult companion and personal care for a range of hours for 143 to 164 per month. In the new model, this individual would only be eligible for 123.2 hours per month. And again, the nurse could adjust those hours upward or downward. In the plan of care, The overview of our current process is the following the completion of the assessment, the RN discusses the provider options with the client. And probably the most confusing for the clients is that we talk about all of the services individually. Homemaker, who do you want to be your homemaker provider? Adult companion, who do you want to be your adult companion provider, and so forth. But once those provider selections are made, then the providers are sent the plan of care to implement. Again, a side-by-side comparison of our current system versus our new system. The DASRN will continue to talk about provider options with the clients. That won't be a change. The clients will select the providers that fulfill their needs. In the new model, there will only be the attendant care service that person has to make the decision for the provider for. No more of the smaller services. It'll be grouped together. No changes for the non-attendant care service provider selections. And then the providers will still be responsible for implementing the services. The benefits for the new selection process for the client is the attendant care services will only be one provider used by that client. Providers of personal care, attendant care, homemaker, and adult companion services must be able to offer all 4 services in the attendant care bundle. I mean, we're just going to call it attendant care. You won't be dealing with these individual services. And then for the client, any changes of non-attendant care services, there won't be any changes of non-attendant care services like home delivered meals and respite. Those services are currently under review, as I've told you earlier. And the goal is to enhance the client's experience of care and enable the clients to take an active role in their care.